Dark water. A ferry wakes and dies. A smokestack coughs somewhere upriver. Distant, patient. Light on glass. Broken glass. Someone runs a wooden ladder out into a cold current. Hands wet coats. Blankets laid on a lawn. No cheering, only the rasp of jackets and the small, terrifying hush when people stop breathing the same air. Ladders remember fingers. Planks remember weight. A hospital light in a window. A boiler house where the night smells of metal and wet wood. Children's shoes, a dress sleeve snagged on a railing. Nothing theatrical. Only the facts of bodies meeting shore. Voices counting. Names lost between waves. A town on the other side of the river keeps going. Trains, streetcars, markets, music. But here, there is a place carved out of distance. Locked doors. A stair that leads nowhere. Men in uniforms who ferry the sick like luggage. What do you do with a city's fear? Where do you put the people the city cannot or will not hold close? Who decides which lives are exiles and which are allowed to return? It sits in the East River, close enough to the Bronx that you could swim it if you were reckless. Across from Rikers Island, another name heavy with confinement. North Brother Island, 20 acres, a sliver of land wedged between currents wrapped in brackish water and ferry wakes. From the air, it looks almost gentle. Trees crowd the shoreline. Ivy drapes broken windows. A smokestack rises above the canopy like a finger that forgot what it was pointing to, and yet this place was never meant to feel welcoming. In the early 1600s, Dutch explorer Adrian block charted these waters in around 1611 to 1614, mapping the narrow strait that would become one of the busiest waterways in America. He called this stretch of islands the Gazellen, the Brothers, North Brother and South Brother, two fragments of rock in a restless channel. For centuries, North Brother was little more than a transaction, passed between Dutch and British control, granted in 1695 to a private owner named Joseph Graham, advertised at auction in 1791 with mention of a tavern or inn, a strange idea, hospitality on a windswept outcrop surrounded by tide. But the island never became a neighborhood. It never grew streets or churches or corner stores. Administratively, it lingered under Westchester County for generations. Even after New York City expanded northward and annexed the Bronx in 1874, the island's status shifted slowly. Only in 1881 was it formally transferred to the city. By then, Manhattan was surging, immigration swelling its population, factories pressing against tenements, ships docking daily with thousands seeking new lives. Growth brought density. Density brought vulnerability. The island's most important feature was not its soil or its size. It was its separation. Half a mile of water is not much, but in the 19th century, it was a barrier that felt absolute. No bridges, no casual crossings, only boats controlled by whoever ran them. A place you could see from shore and not reach without permission. In 1869, the federal government acquired the southern tip of the island to build a lighthouse. Even before its medical chapter began, North Brother was associated with warning, a signal to passing ships, a marker of danger in the current. And in the mid-19th century, Westchester County briefly used the island for temporary smallpox hospitals. Not yet permanent, not yet fully institutional, but the idea had taken root. This was where the sick could be placed, away from the city, yet still inside its jurisdiction. By the 1880s, New York faced recurring outbreaks of smallpox, diphtheria, and typhoid. Tenement life accelerated transmission. Public health infrastructure strained. Officials needed space, not a hospital in the city, a hospital from the city. North Brother Island offered something few places could: containment without exile from authority. Patients could be ferried out quickly. Staff could monitor them. Supplies could be delivered from the Bronx shoreline at 138th Street, and if necessary, the island could be sealed. It was isolation engineered by geography. From Manhattan's skyline, the island would have looked small. From the deck of a quarantine boat, it must have looked final. A patch of trees, brick rising through branches. A shoreline that meant you were no longer just ill. You were separate. In city isolation, not banishment to a distant wilderness, but a removal that everyone could see. And once the city decided what this island would become, there was no going back to taverns and quiet maps. By the 1880s, New York City had a problem it could no longer hide. Smallpox outbreaks flared in crowded neighborhoods. Diphtheria and typhoid moved through tenements with ruthless efficiency. The city already operated a contagion hospital. Founded in 1855 on Blackwell's Island, now Roosevelt Island. In 1875, it was renamed Riverside Hospital. But by the mid-1880s, officials decided the facility was too close to dense population. In 1886, Riverside Hospital was relocated to North Brother Island. The move was deliberate, strategic. Architect Charles C. Haight designed the new campus in 1885-1886. The layout followed a radial plan, a central spine with ward pavilions, extending outward, allowing air circulation and separation between patients. Isolation was not just geographic, it was architectural. Brick wards, an administration building, a kitchen and laundry, a morgue, dock facilities for ferries bringing the sick across the river. Everything arranged to control contagion. At first, the focus was smallpox. The disease terrified the public. Patients suspected of infection were removed, quickly and sometimes forcibly, and transported by boat. Over time, Riverside expanded to treat diphtheria, measles, scarlet fever, and typhoid fever. The island became a city within a city. By the 1890s and early 1900s, additional pavilions were constructed, nurses' homes, staff cottages, a school building, a chapel, boiler houses to generate heat and power. The campus grew dense with brick and steam pipes. Supplies and personnel traveled by ferry. From East 138th Street in the Bronx, the half-mile crossing made daily life complicated. Early staff often lived on site in dormitories because commuting was unreliable in harsh weather. Life there was austere. In 1926, a state health official condemned conditions at Riverside as positively disgraceful, citing unsanitary kitchens and outdated infrastructure. Patients were sometimes transported in open wagons to the docks before boarding. Ferries, exposed to wind and public view. Elevators were lacking in certain buildings. And yet, the hospital served a critical purpose. Public health reformers, including Jacob Riis, acknowledged that isolating contagious patients prevented wider catastrophe. In an era before antibiotics, quarantine was one of the few effective tools available. During the 1916 polio epidemic, Riverside admitted numerous cases as fear rippled through the city. Children were examined, separated, ferried across the river. The island absorbed panic the way its shoreline absorbed tide. By the 1930s, medical priorities shifted again. Tuberculosis, slow wasting, persistent, demanded new facilities. In 1943, an Art Moderne tuberculosis pavilion opened on North Brother Island. It was modern by the standards of the day. Large windows for sunlight, structured ventilation, clean lines replacing the older Victorian wards. But even as the pavilion opened, medical science was moving faster than brick. Antibiotics and improved vaccines were emerging. The logic of massive quarantine complexes was beginning to weaken. Still, for decades, the island functioned as New York's containment zone. And at the center of its most famous chapter was one woman, Mary Mallon, born in 1869 in Ireland, an immigrant cook, healthy in appearance, but identified as an asymptomatic carrier of typhoid fever. Public health investigators traced multiple outbreaks to households where she had worked. In 1907, authorities forcibly quarantined her. After initial detention elsewhere, she was transferred to Riverside Hospital on North Brother Island. She spent 3 years there. In 1910, she was released under the condition that she would never again work as a cook. But in 1915, she was discovered cooking under an alias, and another outbreak followed. She was arrested again, returned to North Brother Island. This time she would remain. From 1915 until her death in 1938, Mary Mallon lived in isolation on the island. Records indicate she resided in a small private cottage near the hospital grounds. She worked in the laboratory at times. She maintained that she had been unfairly treated, and her case would later become central in debates over civil liberties and public health authority. She died on North Brother Island in 1938 after nearly 23 years of confinement during her second quarantine. No dramatic courtroom speeches, no final reconciliation, just a life measured in ferry crossings, one outward and never back. By the early 1940s, Riverside Hospital stood as a fully built medical campus, wards, dormitories, a TB pavilion, administrative buildings, boiler plants. Photographs from that era show a dense institutional landscape carved into 20 acres of river rock, and then abruptly, Its original mission began to end. In April 1944, Riverside Hospital closed, not with ceremony, but with shortage. World War II drained staff. Public health strategies evolved. The need for large quarantine islands diminished. The buildings remained. The docks remained. The smokestack remained. But the purpose that had defined the island for nearly 60 years was finished. On the morning of June 15, 1904, the river was already crowded. Excursion boats, barges, tugboats pushing slow loads against the current. The steamboat General Slocum left Manhattan carrying members of St. Mark's, Evangelical Lutheran Church, mostly women and children from the Lower East Side's German-American community. It was a church outing, a summer picnic. More than 300 passengers boarded. Shortly after departure, fire broke out below deck. The blaze spread with terrifying speed. Lifeboats were wired in place. Life preservers were rotten, filled with disintegrating cork. Panic overtook order. Captain William H. Van Schaik steered the burning vessel toward the nearest shore he could reach, North Brother Island. The ship ran aground along its western edge. By then, flames had consumed much of the upper structure. Many passengers had already jumped into the East River. Most could not swim. Heavy wool clothing dragged them under. An estimated 1,021 people died. It remains one of the deadliest disasters in New York City history. Riverside Hospital staff responded immediately. Nurses, doctors, orderlies, and even ambulatory patients formed human chains along the shoreline. Ladders were extended into the water. Blankets were laid across hospital lawns. Survivors were pulled from the current and carried uphill toward brick wards, meant for fever, not flame. Bodies washed ashore for hours. Many of the dead were children. The tragedy devastated Manhattan's Little Germany, then centered around Kleindeutschland on the Lower East Side. Entire families disappeared in a single morning. Funeral processions moved through streets that felt suddenly hollow. On North Brother Island, the lawns where contagious patients once walked became temporary morgues. The island had been built to contain disease. Instead, it became a witness to fire. Years later, the memory lingered. Some accounts note that fragments of the ship drifted along the shoreline for days. The hospital grounds, so carefully designed for separation, had briefly been transformed into a site of collective grief. But catastrophe was not rare here. It was simply varied. During smallpox scares in the early 1900s, children showing symptoms were removed from tenement apartments and ferried across the river. Parents sometimes resisted. Public health officers arrived with authority backed by law. Isolation orders were not suggestions. Records describe families watching boats depart, knowing they could not follow. In 1916, as polio swept through New York City, fear returned with new intensity. Thousands of cases were reported citywide. Riverside admitted children suspected of infection. The sight of ferries carrying young patients became part of the city's summer anxiety. Newspapers reported case counts daily. Inside the wards, treatment options were limited. Supportive care, rest, observation. Windows opened for air circulation. Outside, the river moved indifferently past it all. And then there was Mary Mallon, already confined, already a symbol. By the time of her second quarantine in 1915, public opinion had hardened. Newspapers labeled her Typhoid Mary. Her identity became shorthand for invisible threat, yet records indicate she worked periodically in the hospital laboratory during her later years on the island. She lived in relative physical comfort compared to many patients, but she remained legally restricted. She suffered a stroke in 1932. She died in 1938. Her body left the island in a coffin, the same route patients had taken for decades, only in reverse. Other patients passed through with less notoriety. Immigrants from Ireland, Italy, Eastern Europe. Domestic workers, laborers, children. Their names survive in admission logs, not headlines. For many, North Brother Island was a temporary sentence, weeks or months until they were declared no longer contagious. For others, tuberculosis lingered. The disease required prolonged isolation before effective antibiotics existed. The hospital's architecture reflected hierarchy. Separate wards, designated areas for men, women, and children. Staff housing slightly removed from patient quarters. Even in isolation, order was enforced. By the 1930s, Public health improvements began reducing the scale of quarantine operations. Vaccination campaigns lowered smallpox cases. Sanitation reforms improved urban conditions. The island grew quieter, but its identity had already been fixed. North Brother was where the city sent its emergencies, medical or otherwise. A fire, an outbreak, a person deemed too dangerous to remain in ordinary circulation. The ferry crossing became symbolic. A short distance, that meant everything. When Riverside Hospital closed in April 1944, the island did not empty overnight. Beds remained. Boilers cooled slowly. The docks still faced the Bronx. World War II had drained medical staff and reshaped city priorities. The Great Quarantine Campus, once essential, no longer fit the moment. For 2 years, North Brother Island stood in suspension. Brick wards, locked doors, an entire medical infrastructure without patients. Then in 1946, it was given a new purpose. New York State leased the abandoned campus and converted it into housing for returning veterans using the GI Bill. Colleges across the city were flooded with enrollment. Columbia, Fordham, NYU, Juilliard. Classrooms filled faster than housing could be built. North Brother became Riverside Campus. Former hospital dormitories were cleaned and repurposed. Wards that once held contagious patients now held young couples and their children. The island developed something it had never truly had before: domestic routine. At its peak in the late 1940s, between 1,200 and 1,500 people lived there. Married students, infants, toddlers. A nursery school operated on site. A small grocery store served residents. Movie nights were held on a basketball court. Residents described it as a little village. Isolated, yes, but communal. Ferries ran regularly from 134th Street in the Bronx. Unlike the earlier hospital era, improvements allowed cars to be loaded onto boats. The crossing was still necessary, but it felt less punitive. For the first time, North Brother Island was not defined by illness. Children played where ambulances had once unloaded patients. Laundry hung from windows that had once been sealed to control infection. The tuberculosis pavilion, completed only in 1943, found itself serving families instead of the sick. And yet the geography did not change. Winter winds still cut across the river. Fog still swallowed the shoreline. The commute remained inconvenient. Residents depended entirely on ferry schedules. A missed boat meant a missed class, a missed shift, a delay that rippled through daily life. By 1951, most veteran families had moved elsewhere. More practical housing became available on the mainland. The island village thinned out. Again, North Brother stood nearly empty, but the city was facing another crisis. In the early 1950s, heroin addiction among adolescents became a growing concern in New York. Public officials sought controlled environments for rehabilitation, spaces removed from urban influence. In 1952, the state opened a rehabilitation center for young drug addicts on North Brother Island. The old hospital wards were converted once more. Dormitories reconfigured, security tightened. Many of the youths admitted were court-committed. Some accounts indicate they felt confined against their will. Treatment programs combined therapy, discipline, and isolation from outside contact. The island's old logic returned. Remove the problem, place it across water, monitor it from a distance. Reports from the era mention administrative problems and allegations of corruption among staff. The facility struggled with oversight. For some patients, the experience felt less like care and more like containment. By 1963, the rehabilitation center closed. No ceremony, no ribbon cutting, just departure. And this time, there would be no new experiment waiting to take its place. The city had changed. Public health policy shifted toward community-based treatment. Advances in medicine, especially antibiotics and vaccines, made large quarantine islands increasingly obsolete. Maintaining infrastructure on a small, isolated island was expensive. Ferries, utilities, structural upkeep, all of it required money and political will. North Brother Island had served smallpox, tuberculosis, veterans, and addiction recovery. It had been hospital, village, institution. After 1963, it became none of them. The last program ended. The last regular ferry stopped. Doors were locked, not to keep people in, but to keep them out. After 1963, the island did not explode into ruin. It sagged into it. Utilities were shut off. Boilers went cold. Pipes dried and cracked through winter freeze. Without heat, buildings began to fail from the inside. Moisture crept into brick. Wood warped. Roof membranes loosened under salt air and wind. Windows shattered, first from neglect, later from trespassers. There was no formal demolition. No sweeping clearance. The city considered proposals: homeless housing, prison expansion, parkland conversion. None materialized. Cost estimates were high. Ferry logistics complicated everything. The island remained administratively owned, but practically untouched. By the late 1960s, North Brother Island was fully unoccupied. The tuberculosis pavilion, completed in 1943 with modern optimism, stood barely 20 years before abandonment. Its basement eventually flooded. Metal fixtures corroded, paint peeled in long curls from institutional green walls. The radial hospital plan was still visible from above, but on the ground paths blurred. In 1909, the southern end of the island had been extended by roughly 4 acres through seawall construction. That engineered edge now eroded. Sections of retaining wall slipped into the East River. Concrete cracked under root pressure. The docks deteriorated. The ferry gantry rusted in place, a skeletal reminder of scheduled crossings that would never resume. Inside the buildings, floors gave way. Open manholes remained uncovered. Staircases warped and collapsed. By the 1970s, reports described the structures as derelict. Roofs caved in. Interiors littered with debris. Vandals left graffiti across plaster walls. Urban explorers, despite trespassing laws, slipped across the water and documented what they found. Hospital beds overturned, file cabinets rusted shut, chapel spaces overtaken by vines. Nature did not move politely. English ivy climbed fire escapes. Black locust and ailanthus forced through window frames. Trees rooted in upper floors where soil accumulated from years of leaf decay. The boiler house smokestack remained upright, but its surrounding structure became choked with growth. The island's 25 surviving buildings entered what city reports later called extreme dilapidation. Humidity from the river accelerated corrosion. Steel beams oxidized. Masonry joints weakened. Without regular maintenance, even durable brick surrendered. By the 1980s and 1990s, North Brother Island had become something else entirely, a ruin in plain sight. From the Bronx shoreline, commuters could glimpse red brick facades through trees, but there were no signs, no ferries, no official narrative, just absence. Access was technically illegal. The site was considered unsafe. Structural instability, open shafts, collapsing floors, hazards multiplied each year. In 2001, management of the island shifted, formally to the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation. The city no longer saw the buildings as viable infrastructure. They were liabilities. The decision was not to rebuild. It was to protect what had replaced them. By then, wildlife had claimed the campus. Bird colonies nested in upper floors and tree canopies. Vegetation stabilized soil where asphalt had cracked. The island's abandonment had allowed an unintended transformation. The silence was no longer institutional, it was ecological, but the physical evidence of its past remained. Skeletal wards, a chapel without glass, corridors open to sky. North Brother Island did not vanish. It decayed slowly enough that every phase could still be read in brick and rust. Today, North Brother Island is owned by New York City. It is managed by the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation. Not as a park, not as a landmark you can visit on a Sunday afternoon. It is part of the Harbor Herons Wildlife Sanctuary Network, a protected nesting ground in the East River. In the late 20th century, biologists documented colonies of black-crowned night herons, great egrets, snowy egrets, and great blue herons nesting among the ruins. The discovery shifted the island's future. What had been viewed as derelict real estate became critical habitat. The same buildings that once held patients now shelter birds. Upper floors without roofs provide open nesting platforms. Trees that pierced through wards became canopies. By the early 2000s, the city formally restricted public access. Entry requires special permission and an escort. Unauthorized visits are illegal. The reasons are practical and ecological. Unstable structures, open shafts, and protected wildlife. There are no tours sold to tourists, no concession stands, no interpretive plaques for casual visitors. Occasionally, researchers, conservation workers, or city officials are ferried across under controlled conditions. They remove invasive species like English ivy and black locust to preserve native growth. They monitor nesting patterns. They assess shoreline erosion. The island is no longer managed as architecture. It is managed as habitat, and yet culturally it remains something else. Writers and photographers have documented its ruins. Photojournalist Christopher Payne published extensive images of the island's decaying interiors and beds, rusted into floors, stairwells swallowed by green light. Articles in Smithsonian Magazine and other publications have described it as a secret in plain sight. The fascination is understandable. From the Bronx shoreline, you can see it clearly, brick through branches, a smokestack rising above forest. It looks accessible. It is not. North Brother occupies a particular place in public imagination, not because of invented ghost stories, but because of documented history. Disease, fire, confinement, quarantine. Mary Mallon's decades of isolation are still cited in discussions of public health ethics. Her case is studied in debates about civil liberties and state authority. The island has become shorthand for the question, when does protection become imprisonment? During later epidemics, from AIDS to Ebola to COVID-19, journalists and historians revisited North Brother as precedent, not as myth, as record. It stands as a physical archive of how a city once managed fear, and yet, paradoxically, most New Yorkers have never set foot on it. It is visible from highways, from apartment windows, from Rikers Island. It appears in the background of aerial photographs. It is there, persistent, but inaccessible. Urban explorers sometimes attempt to breach its perimeter. Photographs surface online. Broken wards, vines over chapel pews. City officials respond with warnings about safety and trespassing laws. The tension continues. Preserve the ruins? Demolish them? Open the island carefully? Leave it untouched? City council discussions have occasionally floated limited public access, light touch approach, but structural assessments indicate that stabilization would require significant investment. For now, policy favors ecological protection over architectural revival. North Brother Island has become something rare in New York City, a space that resists development. No luxury condos, no adaptive reuse lofts, no curated nostalgia, just trees, brick, and restricted shoreline. In a city defined by reinvention, this island remains paused. There are cities that erase their past quickly, and there are cities that seal it off. North Brother Island was never meant to be remembered warmly. It was built for containment, for distance, for management of what frightened people most: disease, fire, addiction, the unpredictable human body. Each era believed it was acting rationally. Quarantine smallpox before it spreads, isolate typhoid before it multiplies, remove the addicted from the streets and place them somewhere controlled. The logic was consistent. Water is boundary, brick is barrier. But the island also forces a quieter question: who gets sent away? And who makes that decision? Mary Mallon insisted she was healthy. Records show she worked, lived, breathed like anyone else. Yet she spent decades confined because science identified her as a carrier. Public safety prevailed over personal freedom. The General Slocum survivors did not choose the island. They arrived through catastrophe. The lawns became temporary morgues because there was nowhere else to lay the dead. Veterans, young families, and they arrived by policy, not fear. For a few years, the island held laughter instead of illness. Then the adolescents in rehabilitation. Many court-committed, crossed the same water under different authority. The geography did not change. Only the justification did. North Brother Island is not a ghost story. It is administrative history written in brick, a record of how a city responds when it feels threatened, a record of how solutions evolve and how they age. Antibiotics rendered the tuberculosis pavilion obsolete within years. Vaccines made mass quarantine less necessary. Social attitudes toward addiction shifted. What was once urgent became excessive. What was once modern became impractical. Now the island stands as something almost accidental, a wildlife sanctuary born from abandonment. Heron's nest where patients once coughed. Ivy threads through laboratory windows. It asks nothing loudly. It does not demand redevelopment. It does not advertise tours. It simply exists. A visible reminder that fear leaves architecture behind, and that the distance between protection and exclusion is sometimes only half a mile of water. Stand on the Bronx shoreline at dusk. Look out across the East River. You will see trees, brick, A smokestack that no longer smokes. It does not look dramatic. It does not look cursed. It looks paused. North Brother Island is not ancient. It is not a medieval ruin swallowed by centuries. Its buildings are barely 100 years old. Its hospital closed within living memory. Veterans once pushed strollers where patients once waited for diagnoses. Teenagers once stared out from dormitory windows that now hold nests. Time did not bury this place. Policy did. A city decided when it was needed. A city decided when it was not. And so the island remained, close enough to see, distant enough to ignore. But it carries questions that feel current. When we isolate for safety, who pays the price? When we build institutions around fear, what happens when the fear fades? When medicine advances, do we remember the people who were confined before it did? Mary Mallon never left alive. The General Slocum victims never left at all. Veteran families left with degrees and children who grew up somewhere else. Every chapter crossed the same half-mile of water. Today, the Herons have inherited it. No fences in their world. No quarantine orders. Just branches rising through broken floors. Maybe that is the final transformation. A place once designed to separate human beings, now protected from human intrusion entirely. If you've made it this far, you already understand that places like this are more than abandoned structures. They are mirrors. If this story moved you, if you believe forgotten spaces still matter, consider subscribing and continuing this journey through the hidden corners of history. There are more islands, more rooms left behind, more questions waiting just beyond the shoreline, and we are only getting started.